The morning chill silently moves throughout the new country's capital, Ottawa. Not much else is heard in the political city that morning, other than the fast flow of the Ottawa River heard in the distance. Others say goodnight to one another until the next day. However, one sound was heard across the entire city that morning, that being the sound of a gunshot. In the early morning of April 7th, 1868, Thomas D'Arcy McGee was shot through the head while trying to enter his boarding house. He died instantly. A murder mixed with political instability, fierce combat, and religion. A murder where once you begin down the rabbit hole, you will walk into a maze of plot twists and lies. A murder solved, yet full of loose ends. Today, I will attempt to unfold the story and tell you the tale of Canada's greatest murder mystery. Thomas D'Arcy McGee was a passionate writer and speaker. He was one of the most respected politicians throughout the country. His funeral was attended by nearly 80,000 people in Montreal, and his assassination was the first political assassination in the country's history. So who would want to kill him? If we want to figure this out, we need to go back to the past. Or back to the future. Nobody? Okay, here's the video. D'Arcy McGee was born in 1825 in Carlingford, County Louth in Ireland. Through his ability to write, he bounced between North America, the UK, and Ireland, working for different newspapers and businesses. When he returned to Ireland, a great famine struck the country, known as the Great Famine or the Irish Potato Famine. Pushed by the British government's lack of response to the crisis, McGee joined Young Ireland, a nationalist group devoted to Irish emancipation. Through this group is where he participated in an attempted rebellion against the Crown in Scotland, which failed. But this failure led him to travel back to North America, landing in New York. He continued to write in newspapers during this time in the States, but over the decades he became increasingly more interested in Canadian politics. In 1857, he finally decided to move up north to Montreal, feeling that the Irish immigration there was better tolerated, and after hearing that the Irish communities were in desperate need of leadership. Before Christmas that very same year, he was elected to Parliament as a reformer and one of the 3 representatives of Montreal. Talk about moving up the ladder. At first, he was a key player in the battle for Irish in the country, such as his attempt in unifying an Irish colony on the western frontier of the country, but his interest slowly started moving away. Instead, he started focusing on unifying the Canadian provinces and the English and the French alike. Around that same time is when he joined the Conservative Party as the Minister of Agriculture, Immigration and Statistics, joining John Macdonald, the first Prime Minister. Then, he was a key player in both Quebec and Charlottetown conferences to establish the country. His rise was astonishing. He made it up the ranks in a few months and became one of the founding fathers of the nation. He was, quote, generally remembered as an early advocate for minority rights at a time when the politics of the ethnic and religious identity were intensely fraught, end quote. But something in him changed. He started changing his political views on the Irish community, telling them to choose peace instead of violence, and for them to follow the, quote, Canadian model for limited self-government within the British Empire, end quote. However, this new stance on the political climate made his popularity in the Irish community fade, and it labeled him as a traitor in the eyes of a nationalist group called the Fenian Brotherhood. The Fenians were a relatively new group of nationalists in North America. Primarily made of US Civil War veterans, the group committed armed raids in the United States and Canada in the hopes that it would pressure the British government to give Irish independence. They weren't something to be taken lightly either. By 1865, the group had amassed nearly $500,000 and 10,000 troops. D'Arcy McGee didn't fear them, however. He was strongly opposed to them. Quote, as a young man, McGee had become involved with a group of nationalists who advocated rebellion against England. Now, McGee was a harsh critic of another Irish separatist movement called the Fenian Brotherhood. He condemned violence in all secret societies that preached it, end quote. He also believed that they were, quote,
D'Arcy McGee was one of their greatest enemies. To him, they were terrorists, giving Irish Catholics a bad name, villains determined to ruin all the work he'd done to unify Canada. He became the government's mouthpiece in the battle to crush the movement.
Being the only famed nationalist Irishman in Parliament, he was the key piece in the battle against the Fenians. But funny enough, the Fenians' revolutionary ideals could have been directly inspired by McGee's own revolutionary writings. So now we've set the floor. We have two figures waiting to get on the other. On one side, we have a passionate speaker whose popularity in his own community was fading because of his new beliefs. And on the other, we have a new passionate group ready to commit some damage and wanting blood to anyone who opposed them. This battle would happen, and one side would come out on top. Now before we continue on, I just want to mention that it was never confirmed that the Fenian Brotherhood had anything to do with the murder. But it is, however, assumed. So take it as you will. Also, I will be telling you a lot of info in very little bit of time. So, if you're ready to hear the story, here we go. So back to the morning of April 7th. It was nearly 2 a.m. and Darcy McGee finished another one of his passionate speeches in the House of Commons gallery. The speech wraps up, people leave, and McGee joins Sir John A. Macdonald, the Prime Minister of Canada, at the House bar for a cigar. Not long after, Macdonald leaves and McGee then meets with another Member of Parliament, Robert McFarlane, who is finishing his whiskey. After the two have had enough, the pair then decide to leave. McGee grabbed his steel-handled bamboo cane and his brand new white top hat for the short walk home. Let's open up the map. They left through the door, walking past doorkeeper and Prime Minister's own cab driver, Patrick Buckley. The men were then walking in the full moon, illuminating the streets. The men walked through the hill's front gate, turned left on Wellington, and from there, they continued until they reached Metcalfe and went slightly south before reaching the crossroads between Metcalfe and Spark Street. The pair then split, McGee heading west to his boarding house and McFarlane heading towards his home in Lowertown. That was the last time McFarlane would ever see McGee. McGee continued his walk down the street, running into Patrick Buckley's brother, John Buckley, and 3 other men. John Buckley wished McGee a good night, and McGee replied, "Good morning. It is morning now." Those were his last known words. McGee then approached his boarding house. He took out his key and put it on the lock. On the inside, Miss Trotter, the owner of the house, heard knocks coming from the window. She slowly creeps open the door to see McGee falls backwards into the street. The bullet went through the back of his head and got lodged into the boarding house's doorframe. Somewhere nearby, a carriage races away into the night. A message was immediately dispatched to wake the Prime Minister, and the manhunt was on. Habeas corpus was suspended and up to 40 arrests were made. One of those arrests was Patrick Buckley, the Parliament's doorkeeper, and the man that McGee and McFarlane walked by earlier. Luckily for them, Buckley gave the police their first lead, telling them to look into the sandy-whiskered tailor, after having spotted the man loitering around Parliament recently. One of the detectives knew the Irish community well, and immediately thought of a man named Patrick James Whelan. The police followed this tip and found Whelan in his room at the Stars Hotel and Tavern. This being their only real lead, police began searching his room. Quickly, Whelan became the #1 suspect. Throughout his room were Irish nationalist and Fenian publications. And then, when they searched Whelan at the local tavern, they found a .32 caliber Smith & Wesson pistol, fully loaded, and ammunition cartridges. The barrel had powder residue, indicating that the gun had been fired. One bullet had recently been reloaded, and there was evidence that the gun had recently been fired. Whelan was then immediately arrested and charged with the murder of Thomas Darcy McGee only 20 hours after the murder took place. So the suspect is arrested. Whelan will now be tried and an outcome will be decided. And you may be thinking, how come this is a murder mystery if the killer is already caught? Well, that will make sense in a little bit. But for now, let us get introduced to Patrick James Whelan. Patrick James Whelan was a Catholic Irishman who had recently moved to Canada, moving to Montreal in 1865. He was a tailor by trade, having left school at a young age to learn the craft. Now, this new immigrant was being arrested for murder. And before we look more into the case, I just want to leave a little reminder that some of these claims may be a little bit more far-fetched, as this case is from 158 years ago today. So, take that as you will. What I had said earlier about the loaded gun, and the gun that had recently been fired, was one of the most damning pieces of evidence. Other than that, those Irish nationalist and Fenian publications found in his room came into question. Was Whelan a Fenian? Well, if he wasn't, not much was helping him. Plenty of witnesses stated that Whelan was a Fenian. This could have came from the fact that he worked for a man named Peter Eagleson, a known supporter of the Fenians. His own lawyer, John O'Farrell, a notorious lawyer from Quebec, supposedly had Fenian ties. To add on to the pile, in those 40 that were arrested that night, it consisted of Whelan's boss, Mr. Eagleson's, Whelan's landlord, and a few of Whelan's friends. So he was friends with many potential Fenians. So it doesn't necessarily mean he himself was a Fenian, right? Well, maybe not. He was assumed to be in Buffalo at the time of the Battle Ridgeway, a center of Fenian activity, and in another statement, Whelan was arrested for trying to convince a British soldier to join the Fenians. If he isn't Fenian, well, it doesn't look good for him. Let's move away from the Fenian Brotherhood for now and look at the night of the murder. Witnesses claim to have seen Whelan at the Parliament that night, such as Patrick Buckley, who spotted him on the front yard. Multiple witnesses claim to have seen him in the House of Commons gallery that night of the murder, apparently so with the pistol in his pocket. Testimony even revealed that he visited McGee's boarding house twice in the days before the murder. All this evidence is good, but without an actual confession, it would be difficult. Well, that came too. You see, Whelan was overheard confessing, sitting in the Carleton County Gaol. "I shot that fellow. I shot him like a dog." Who he was overheard by is unclear. But from all this evidence, Whelan was in trouble. The trial took little time, and the jury less. In the end, Whelan was found guilty and sentenced to hang. His final two appeals were denied, and on February 11th, 1869, Patrick James Whelan was hanged in front of 5,000 people, one of Canada's last public hangings. He was only 29 years old. His last words were,
"God save Ireland, and God save my soul."
But this was only after he said this.
"I know the man who shot Mr. McGee."
This is when the story changes from a story with one ending to a story with multiple. Whelan seemed like the guy who did the job. He had ties with Fenians. He had the loaded gun who had recently been fired. He was seen all around Parliament and at McGee's house, and even had a supposed confession. But the fact is, when you start digging deeper, you start to find holes in everything. For nearly all this evidence, there was either an explanation or a problem with the points. Let me explain. Let's start with the Fenian ties. It was immediately assumed that Whelan was a Fenian. Why wouldn't he be? With all the allegations and pieces found, it makes sense. But Whelan was always assumed to be a Fenian. He was never proven to be. According to Whelan's friends, he was never interested in politics at all. Whelan even claimed that he was a fan of McGee's. In addition to this, Whelan insisted on his innocence until the very end, writing a letter to the Prime Minister the day before his execution. This would be a very odd thing for a Fenian to do, as they were known for wanting martyrdom. The Fenian claim is a strong one, but it's without a doubt one that balances between truth and lie. We won't ever find out which side it'll land on. Next, let's look at the witnesses. The main witness, a man known as Jean-Baptiste Lacroix, claimed to have seen Whelan following McGee down Spark Street the night of the murder. He was certain it was him. He insisted that he saw McGee wearing his coat, gloves, and black top hat being followed by that man. But that's just it. If he was so certain that Whelan was the person following McGee that night, how come he didn't see McGee's new white top hat? Isn't a detail like that something you wouldn't miss? Granted, it could be a small mistake, but if Whelan was really following McGee, why didn't either Robert McFarlane or John Buckley spot him? In another instance, Lacroix didn't even recognize Whelan when he first saw him. Lacroix as a witness was just unreliable. However, the witnesses don't stop there. Many witnesses stated to have seen Whelan around the area that evening, such as Patrick Buckley, who saw him on the Parliament's front yard. Some claimed it was Fenian, some claimed to have seen him in the House of Commons gallery the night of Darcy McGee's last speech, with the gun in his pocket. While some of these witnesses were truthful, the majority of the witnesses' testimonies only appeared after a reward of $2,000 was put out to anyone who could help point to the assassin. That's nearly $50,000 today. Isn't it strange? Once the reward money is offered, it seemed like everyone's seen the murder take place. The list of odd coincidences doesn't stop there either. Whelan was a devoted Catholic. Much of the Irish were at that time, and still are, making 80% of the island. This wouldn't cause any problems with the trial, unless the prosecutors were able to fill the jury with a group of people who may have already disliked Whelan. Protestants. This already put Whelan at a disadvantage. To add to the court, the Prime Minister, Sir John A. Macdonald, had a great influence over the case. He sat right next to the judge the entire trial, staring down Whelan at every moment, something he shouldn't have been allowed to do. That same judge was another issue. Whelan had appealed his trial, and when he walked into the new courtroom, the same judge sat in the chair, with the Prime Minister beside him. Now all these pieces of argument are good, but this next one that I will tell you will seal the deal, and will show you how this mystery goes deeper than you think. Remember the smoking gun. Literally, the piece of evidence that locked up Whelan. As it turns out, a server from the hotel he was staying at explained that he was trying to sell the gun. A little bit strange, but clearly maybe he was just trying to get rid of it. Then, a maid walked up to the plate. She explained that it made sense why Whelan's gun had recently been fired, because while she was cleaning out his room, she accidentally shot herself with it. And with that statement, she still had the wound to prove it. What I've just told you makes the backbone of this mystery. Whelan may not have been the killer. He could have been an innocent man. Or maybe he was guilty. That we will never know. One thing we can link into is other suspects, and one man sticks out particularly from the others. A man who's already been mentioned. A man who was in court with Whelan the entire time. The other suspect is none other than Whelan's own lawyer, John O'Farrell. Here's the story. Whelan's defense attorney, John O'Farrell, was out the night of the murder. He went to MP James Goodwin's house, a good friend of McGee's, and talked to him for hours. Goodwin said that he led them onto pointless conversation, even if they'd never met before. He talked and he talked for so long that Goodwin wasn't able to go meet McGee after Parliament had wrapped up for the night. Then, around the time of the murder, O'Farrell left, disappeared. A little while later, at a closed toll, a carriage arrived. The attendee asked for a name. The man was John O'Farrell, and he was heading away from the murder. Between these two men, people often think they were working together. Unfortunately, we will never know the true outcome of what killed McGee. Was it the Fenian Brotherhood sending out a hit on a man who was labeled as a traitor? Was it a man who just did it out of spite? Was it a big group working together? Or was it Whelan acting alone? That we will never know. I personally think that Whelan may not have done the killing, but he was definitely involved in some way. What do you think? Do you think Whelan killed Darcy McGee? And other than that, that's the tale of Canada's greatest murder mystery. Hey guys, thank you so much for watching. Is that a plane? Thank you so much for watching today's episode. Firstly, I want to say huge shout out to the Assassination of Darcy McGee video by Canadiana. Like all the clips, basically the entire story and that kind of stuff. Some things that I hadn't seen on just different articles but were in the video. All the research comes from basically that video. So huge shout out to them. Go watch that video. It'll be first in the description and probably in the comments as well. So that's definitely, if you want to see all the other research I've done for this, you can go down below, just in the description, and that'll be there as well. Now, I just want to ask you guys what type of content you guys would like to see. Obviously, I have experimented and made mysteries and that kind of stuff. But I've noticed that a lot of the videos around social figures, pop culture, that kind of stuff end up doing a lot better. So yeah, if you guys want to find out what you guys want to, if you guys want to let me know what you guys like seeing, then just drop a comment down below. And yeah, other than that, I think that's all I gotta say. Hope you guys have a fantastic day. Hope you guys have a fantastic life. Be kind, people, and I'll see you guys next time. Peace out, guys.